Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and I am speaking with Aernoudt Bottemanne, who is a colleague from the OpenExO community. So this is part of the Exponential Organization series. And Aernoudt and I have been in a number of conversations recently about how to create much more value in the world with exponential thinking. And we're certainly going to get into that. What I love about Aernoudt is he's a completely different animal than I am, meaning he's a sales expert, a sales machine. And I am very jealous sometimes of his superpower. So Aernoudt, thank you so much for joining. Can you share with us, what is it that you do and why are you doing what you do?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me in the call after several interesting conversations we've had over the past month during the OpenExO sessions. It was really nice to meet you there. Yeah, what it is, what I do. The short version of it is that I really like to help companies achieve new business models, new go-to-market strategies by applying the latest in technology. I think, in short, that is what I do, and that sounds relatively easy, but the difficult factor is so much not often really the technology in itself, even though it is innovative technology I like to work with, but it's much more the transformation, the path to get there, which is sometimes the more complicating factor. But yeah, that's where we are to help them with. And yes, I definitely like the sales part, which I've learned, which is a separate story, which I'll tell you once over a beer, how I got into sales in the first place, because I did not start as a salesperson. And I actually, if people would have asked me 20 years ago, are you going to be a salesperson? My answer would definitely have been, oh, no, never. But it turned out that actually, it is something I really like. But I also don't do it like what I call the shoe sales person. I really try to deliver value, and I like to talk about innovative things and technology and what people can do with it. And then basically my enthusiasm usually does the rest.
Aernoudt, you can't throw out that you have an amazing story, an origin story that we'll talk about later. I have to ask, how did you get into sales? And let's have our virtual beer right now and hear the story.
Well, how I got into sales actually was that at that point I didn't know who was sitting on my table, but I was with my manager in Toronto when I was working there for Visual Banker, which was the first mobile banking platform in the world in the mid-90s. So most people didn't even have a mobile phone in the Netherlands, and we were building a mobile banking platform, which was awesomely cool, I think. At that time, I was still an architect, somebody working what you would nowadays call on the UX side. So I was very much about the interaction with both the internal employees of the company, because it was not just mobile banking for the end clients, but also a CRM system for tellers in the bank. So people that work in the bank itself. And then having a dinner with my boss, and there was somebody else on the dinner table, and we had a very pleasant dinner. And during the dinner, this gentleman who was underdressed compared to my boss, so that's why I never anticipated that he could actually be much higher ranking in the organization, which turned out it was. So then he asked me like what I thought about sales, and I told him about, those are the people that sell you this second-hand car, and 2 weeks later it breaks down, and then, we never knew anything about this. So not exactly a very positive opinion about sales. And the next morning, we had a very pleasant dinner, so we went home. And next morning, went in the office, and then my manager asked me like, hey, did you know who that person was? And I said, no. I said, very nice person, but I have no idea. Well, then he said, well, he was not my boss, also not his boss, and also not that boss, but the boss of him. So I was counting up, and then, and he was reporting directly into Lou Gerstner, who was at the time the CEO of IBM, for a big company. So I phoned up my wife and said, well, I will probably be in the next aircraft because I'm probably fired because I insulted a very high ranking official from our company. But actually, I did get a phone call from him, but just saying that I needed to pack my bags and go to Scotland to follow a sales training. I was put on a sales training where only the, let's say, client directors, so those people within IBM that run the major accounts, and I was sent to that nice little castle, and it's the IBM way of doing stuff. And and ever since I've been more in the business development and sales and channel kind of side of things, because I still love the technology and I keep that going. But I've learned that actually making technology happen only works if you are able to explain what technology does to non-technical people, because mostly the non-technical people have the budget. So if you're not capable of explaining what something does, you will probably lose some very nice technologies. And that's one of the things I saw happening. And and that's also why this happened, because he came to that table because most of my sales colleagues invited me as a kind of pre-sales role at clients. And I was working as an architect in R&D. So the management had like, why do you fly in somebody working from Toronto who is actually in R&D, and mostly R&D people are not the people you put in front of a client. And they actually said, yeah, but he definitely is capable of explaining what it actually does. So that is how that started. But when I heard that in that morning, I literally phoned my wife because I thought, oh, I will be fired. Oops.
And that, looking at your LinkedIn, that happened, well, before 2000. So this goes back 20 years ago. And then
yeah.
And then some of the credentials you've got, you've got Oracle, Atos, Usoft, HP, OutSystem, so you have worked with the top solution providers literally in the world. So I'm curious, in your experience of being not only a salesperson, but also based on your nature, content owner, what have you learned about, I guess, technology sales or solution sales in those 20 years? Like what are the main themes that are maybe beneficial for people who are selling complex solutions themselves out there in the audience?
Yeah, a couple of things actually. One of the key things is, at least for me, is that you need to like what you're doing. You need to believe in the technology you are selling. And that sounds all that easy, but there are also salespeople sell products which they actually already know is like, for me, that would not work. For me personally, but that may not apply to everybody. I really like to be on the innovative side. I always like to set up new things, sell new solutions, and not do the repeat sale, which is a total different animal, and definitely also needs the professionals to do that correctly, but that's not really my thing. I think what stands out most is that you combine the ideas you hear at the client, like where they want to go to, with the technology that you master, and get into, whether you use design thinking or not, but really get into a kind of a process where you incrementally come to a great idea, because that way you can avoid most RFPs, because if you are in a driver's seat together with your client, many times you have shorter sales cycles in the end, because there is already a trust factor. You are already cooperating with them. You are already adding value, and I think that's the key part. And it's so much more fun to do than answering RFIs and RFPs.
Yeah, I think answering RFIs and RFPs, and for those that don't know, that's a request for information or a request for proposal that
Correct.
typically a large organization would put this out to the market, and they would have a long list of, say, 20 vendors for the RFI. And so that means there's 20 teams of people investing time just to get onto a short list, which might come down to 5 or 10 even for an RFP, which is much more. So you've got 5 or 10 teams investing so much time, and there is one winner, maybe. So it's definitely that, you know, the odds are really not with you. So if you can get in on the innovation, that, you know, sort of the proposition creation side, then definitely. Aernoudt,
I had one colleague actually, which I learned a lot from when I was still really fresh into the sales side. And he said to me something which I remember still till today. And also the person who said it to me, he said, I know there are 2 winners in the sales cycle. The one who wins it and the one who steps out first. Because that's the one who doesn't waste his time and energy and resources on something you cannot win and move on to the next. So don't become what they call column fodder in the US. But step out if you feel like, hey, you're not in control. And actually, I have a kind of a single sheet spreadsheet for that, where I can track and monitor my progress. And based upon that, I can make a qualified decision like, how much chance do I actually have to win this or not? And based upon that, I can then still sometimes pursue, because sometimes you really want to win something or get a foot in the door. But for those, let's say, strategic accounts, accept those strategic accounts. If the percentage is not good, step out.
And I know, what would be a reason to step out? Like, what would be something on your checklist that would be a runaway signal for one of these deals?
Yeah, there are a couple. First of all, of course, the connection you have with the people that run that business, not so much the RFI, RFP, but who's the economic buyer in the part? Do you have a connection with that person? And is the vision of your company you represent, or you as a person, is that aligned? Is there a match? Because if there isn't, you usually have a very low chance of winning. And another one is, how are the KPIs, or in a better way, the OKRs, as they are nowadays starting to get used more often? How well are they defined? Is it a little bit smart and hopefully a lot smart? But quite often I see, and still till today, sometimes see RFIs where what they are asking for, then you really think like, come on, guys, this is not how you're going to get a proper proposal from anybody who is even at their best trying to give you a good response to your proposal. I think those are the 2 key ones. There are more, of course, but those are the 2 most important ones.
Great. It's fascinating how this dance of buying and procuring goes. And when I recommend to people, you know, like technologies or advise people on technology selection, oftentimes I'm coaching the executives of the buying party to not look at the technology, but look at the people who run and own and make the technology. Because I said the technology will change by definition, but can you have a lasting relationship with these humans? Because if you can't, don't do it. It will just be pain and suffering.
Well, that's one approach, which can definitely work long run, but there's one deficit to that approach. And that is, if you set up your architecture such a way that if the people cannot deliver the new functionality or something, but you can choose then the best technology and then plug it out and replace it by something new as soon as you find a company or technology that fits better. And so you have 2 major strategies to do it.
Well, I don't think those strategies are mutually exclusive either. And I think we're going to get into a composable architecture discussion now based on that trigger. So I think you certainly can't ignore the technology, because it needs to fulfill your process requirements and the give you the capabilities it wants. Hopefully you have architected yourself so that it is somewhat flexible, and you're not just complete lock-in. But honestly, some of the larger vendors are masters of lock-in. So even though it doesn't look like it, you're screwed. You're tied down. And then if you have an uncomfortable feeling about the nature or the personality or the character of the people. So I think there's a lot of, maybe another episode would be about how to buy tech. But anyways, Aernoudt.
I do have some interesting views on that as well, based upon a training I've once had when I was in the US from a Mr. called Mr. McLaughlin. And I think some people who are in the hardcore strategic selling, so the big project selling, because it was a very expensive sales training. But they will definitely know him. Because there's not so only a sales cycle, there's also a buying cycle. And I have some very nice graphs how they map over each other. Basically, based upon that, on the questions you get from your customer, you basically know where they are in their process. So that's the funny part, because just by them asking questions, they are actually telling you where they are. So if you pay very well attention, you know exactly how to address those questions as well. But that's not something some of the buyers would like to hear, but actually their questions basically betray where they are.
Well, yeah, my preference is oftentimes to be more open. So if people are oftentimes RFIs go out to learn. Basically, they put it out there because they're just wanting to learn. And I think for me, it would be more honest or fair to say, we want to learn, instead of doing this other way. But anyhow, composable architecture. I had the privilege of reading an article from you recently about composable architecture in banking. Can you share with us what is, composable architecture or composable banking, and why does it matter?
Yeah, I gladly do. And the good news about it is actually, even though I'm currently mostly active on the banking side and partially in the healthcare, but actually the composable architecture as a concept is something that not only could be used, but I think actually maybe should be used in every vertical, because basically what the concept does is it allows you to make use of the best offerings which are currently there in a way that you can plug out / plug in, pull out or plug in functionality which as it comes out, which is better than some of the current components. When it is loosely coupled, so you do need to put up like an orchestration, both from a technical perspective, and you need to put in the orchestration from an organizational perspective in order to manage that. But if you do that, and it is also a continuous process, the whole, then it gives you the ultimate flexibility in using the latest in functionality, which can make a difference for you competing against your competition, and at the same time not getting strapped into locked in, and also not getting problems with the data which goes across all of those processes, of course. And that is something which drives a lot of benefits for the clients, and particularly not only on the customer, so the CI ratio, the cost income ratio, but also very much from a delivery perspective, so that you can much more quickly than before get new functionality to your users. Because in the end, if you do not have happy users, you will not have a business in the longer run.
Now, composable architecture, can you just quickly compare, because you go back, and oftentimes this is a dream for many organizations, whether it's called service orientation or microservices as an architectural pattern, or if you go really generic, sort of API economy, and interfaces is one of the attributes of the OpenExO model, which we'll talk about in a bit. How is composable business related to some of these other architectural themes?
It's basically all of the things you just mentioned on steroids combined.
Okay,
that's the short version of it. So it makes use of all of that. So APIs are I would say a mandatory part in that. And if you do that well, it can be done really, really efficient and really well. The key thing is that you as a company need to decide which parts of both the technology and also the process and the people around it are going to be your people, and which are from your SaaS or other provider in that. Because this is where you really make the impact at your clients. So you really need to be on top of that, in control of that. So of those key parts, you definitely need to know what you're doing and have the right people to do that. That's very, very important.
Yeah, when I look at some of these architectural patterns, these are not for beginners. This can be a sophisticated and mature approach to business and technology design. What is an example or best case anywhere in the world so people can orient on the power of composable architectures? Does something come immediately to mind?
Yeah, I mean, there are one of the partners I work with is Mambu, for example. They deliver a core banking engine, which is literally made for composable banking. It is built upon a framework from Corzoid, which is an event-driven orchestration layer. And maybe it's good or not to also explain a little bit about the difference between event-driven versus process-driven. So most companies work process-driven, and particularly all of the ones that run on SAP or anything like that, ERP kind of solutions, that they are basically always process-driven. If you look at the amount of transactions that actually do not have a human interaction, there the event-driven part is much more important, whether that is in telephony switches like it was from the past. And there is a reason why I mentioned this, but I'll come back to that later. And compared to how you do business, because event-driven also needs a different kind of thinking. I always call it event thinking, because separate from your process and how you define, for example, your sales process, somebody is either a prospect, or they are a customer, or they have been a customer. The key is, for most companies, how do you get those people that are currently a prospect, how do you make them into a client, into a customer? So that is basically a state machine where one group is a prospect, and that's basically a state. And the other group, which is another state, which is they are already a customer. And there are different steps in it. So if you really want to set up a proper architecture for something a little bit more complex, you will actually always have a combination of process-driven and event-driven. So that does make it a little bit more complex. But if you think about that, so if you have a proper CTO to set it up for you, and that is also one of the things that I help my clients with. If you set that up in a proper way, and also as a continuous process so that you can keep adapting, that is how you keep your costs down and your flexibility super high. So that's how you win in the market, basically.
Beautiful. I will put a link to the article that you put together on this, and also maybe to Mambo, so people can just go and orient and check that out. If we're turning the corner, increasing performance, efficiency, growth, exponential growth, is coming back to where we met, which is on the part of the OpenExO community. And there was recently a global event called the Decade of the Exponential Organization. And we were, of course, part of the Netherlands chapter there. And we've been having a number of conversations about how to really help organizations with their thinking and their mindset to take advantage of these exponential trends. Can you share, in your words, what is an exponential organization, and why are you a part of OpenExO?
Why I'm part of it. It's definitely something which triggered me, because actually when I first read about OpenExO as an organization and the principles behind it, I really came to the conclusion, like, finally somebody put a label on it or a name on it, because there were so many things which I already was doing to a certain extent, or already to the fullest extent, over for so many years. So for me, it came together like, finally everything so nice put together. Yeah, but what it is really about, it's about thinking differently, taking a very different angle to things, and making a major leap. So it's not like, well, let's see if we can shave off 10% of the cost, which for many clients already would be nice. But this is really about how do we grow, at more than 100% growth rate for the next X years, etc. So it's really about taking it exponentially. That's where the X is in. And that's also where to also give one of the examples from the composable banking part. One of their clients, N26, is a German bank. In just a couple of years, they already have several million clients. And if you look at their cost-income ratio, it's less than a third of a normal bank. I mean, that is really exponential thinking put in action, and that is, I like it. It's very much aligned with the design thinking as a principle of how to come up with new things. So for everybody who likes to work on the innovation side, OpenExO is a blessing, basically.
Cool. If we dive into the N26 case a bit, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it. I'm not really, but I can imagine. There are 11 attributes of an exponential organization, which have been written in the book titled, surprise, surprise, Exponential Organizations. So you can get on Amazon or anywhere. And what attributes of an EXO do you know, or do you think N26 might have pulled as a lever to achieve that performance?
Well, actually, quite a few, because, for example, they don't have any physical office except for the office where they make their software. And most of the people actually are also working from home. So looking at the amount of people, no offices, so no physical investments. They are on nearly everything. They fit. They can be mapped, basically. And that's not just N26 is a nice example because it's also one of the examples from Mambu. But there are also other ones like the N technology. What is happening with Mr. Ba? At least I hope it still keeps happening. After that, they now took him as kind of a re-education program in China, which I hope that he still continues with his N technologies part, because that's also very much in line with the OpenExO thought. It's very innovative thinking, and it will force generally kind of conservative market, which financial services is, to rethink some of their businesses, because otherwise they will be out of business, actually. So I kind of like that. It really forces people to get more innovation going.
More innovation, and that seems to be a hot topic for everyone. So Aernoudt, well, before we wrap up, I would like to invite everyone. You can go to openexo.com. This is part of that OpenExO series, and there's a foundation course which is free to take. It's a series of videos that explain everything. If you want to be certified, there's a small fee to pay for the certification costs and things like that. It was like $50 or something almost irrelevant. And the point of OpenExO is to share the insights and the capabilities, not only for startups and unicorn companies, but also for established organizations in governance that want to sort of increase the impact they make exponentially. So a huge invitation to get involved in that. And if you're in the Benelux region, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, then reach out to Aernoudt or myself, because we're part of that growing circle, bandits of pirates who are sharing this message with the with the market as widely and as loudly as we can. So
yeah, I think it will actually help a lot of people, because what I really liked about OpenExO as well, it doesn't matter where you are a technical person or more a business person. Just by the MTP alone, so the mean transformational purpose, it forces you to think about, what am I adding to this world? And in itself, it is a useful part of, I would say, the growth paths of any individual in the professional world. So it's definitely worthwhile doing it.
And it can be, confronting as well. So I'm curious what yours is, but my massive transformative purpose, the MTP, which is the pillar of the exponential thinking, is Mine is to create or co-create more joy and meaning in the workplace around the world through the disciplined pursuit of simplicity. And that continues to refine, meaning
Yes.
it is the pursuit of joy and meaning because I leave happiness to the individuals. For me, I'm really focused on the workplace. And the method is this pursuit of simplicity. And that refinement of my mission has really come through conversations through people like you and the OpenExO community. So what is your last question? What is your MTP? And then we'll wrap up.
Okay. Well, my MTP is also indeed about at the workplace, but also a little bit outside. My MTP is enable and grow new business models by using innovative technology and using that for the better, and then for the better of both the people, the end clients, and also the people who work for that company.
Aernoudt Bottemanne, thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Chris.
Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player and download the Simplicity Kit from ebullient.com.